Minasan, McMegane here, and today we are back with another tier list adjustment video. So there is gonna be a lot of changes with the tier list a bit for the old tier list as well. So I'll be adjusting it. So before we get into the actual tier list, do know that this is based on my experience with the deck itself. Everyone may have different experience from one another, and you know, I'm entitled to my experience and everything. So if you guys have your own experience and you think some of the entry are a little bit off, do leave down in the comments below. I want to see what you guys think of it. And also I'll be covering all the BT08 right lines, the new right lines, the chrono jets, as well as the one-off boss unit that we have been seeing a lot in the past few months. I didn't do it during the previous tier list because I thought there's not a lot of them, but now that there's a lot of them come out, I thought it's the high time to really put it into the proper tier list. So yeah. Also, if you guys enjoy this kind of content, consider like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You know, I make manga content semi-regularly and stream relatively regularly on Twitch, so you can check those out and, you know, follow, subscribe, do whatever needed to do on those platforms. And without further ado, let's start off with readjusting. So before we get into the actual tier list itself, I want to do something very simple, because one of the biggest backlash I got was why you are grouping some of the B tier deck lists into the other B tier deck, and those are usually like the A tier deck that got dropped to B tier, mainly because of my rulings of like putting only 10 decks in the A tier and 3 decks in the S tier. So because of that, I thought, okay, to make things fair, I'm gonna make a new tier list. I mean tier for that particular decks that they are really good, but I don't think they are the top 10 deck in that particular tier. Think of it as tier 1.5. That would be the easiest way to make a comparison. So
one eternity later.
So this tier will be called A minus. So I will call this a pretty good pick tier. So I decided to put a description into each of the tiers, so just to make things a little bit more easier for you guys to know what am I thinking for this tier. So S is the cream of the crop. A is a very good pick for the tournament. A minus is pretty good pick. You can top, but it's a little bit less consistent than the A tier. B is decent, playable, but it's missing that oomph that the decks in the higher tier really has. C is playable, but there is something that kind of hold the deck back, and the card that they released so far haven't really fixed the issue of that particular issue that really plagued the deck. And D is like, it missing something really urgently, you know. It really needs just one more card to really improve. So that was where I put Eva last time as well. It just needs one more order to be good, and you see where she is now. Okay, so let's start off from the bottom. So the first one is Hero. So the Hero is the first one that will be moving out of D tier to the bottom of the C tier, mainly because of the brand new Blankets generic card, Ardent Robust. I think that's the name pronounced right. Yeah, Ardent Robust. So what the Ardent Robust does is essentially allow you to get a duplicate copy of a same or set order that the deck plays. So right now there is only a few decks that kind of take advantage of this skill, but I think Hero get the best update from this because of the fact that it doesn't have any other way to search for the hero based card other than the grade 1 or Texian. So with this, you have a base deck that allow you to get additional copy of your base, means that you can filter out a little bit more, and not only that, you can also scout. Does the deck still need some more help? Yes, I mean we already see some BT09 support by the time I record this, so I'm quite excited to see what Hero will bring in the BT09, because you know, now they can scout more, now they have a bit more firepower as well. But for now, in BT08, this is where he is. Okay, so for the C tier, there is a few decks that I want to adjust. I don't think there's any of the deck that has a capability good enough to shift into the B tier, but there are still a few adjustments I want to make. First one is of course Herminia. Herminia did get a brand new card. I didn't really judge her fairly back in the LL3 and also BT7. But to put it simply, the deck is not bad now thanks to her ability to be able to do multiple drive check thanks to the new grade 2. Still has quite a bad mechanic of using up the counter blast and everything, but the deck more or less alleviate for it, but it's still not good enough. So because of that, I'm gonna push her on top of the C tier. Like, the deck is a very quite well-oiled machine, but it's a well-oiled crash gear machine rather than the actual car, which is the other decks on the top of her, I guess. Then for media also, I would say she is more or less around the same positioning as Gridon, Hexaorb, and herself, mainly because of the fact that I didn't realize earlier that there was a card that helped you to reduce the cost of Medial, and Medial does call a rear guard regardless of which type of unit you mill to trigger her effects. But it is still a little bit inconsistent in terms of power, so I do think that she needs a little bit of more card to really oomph her up a bit, and because of the fact that her playstyle is still RNG based, and also even though she has a card to reduce the cost, it's still a counterblast too if you don't pull into that particular card, so it's still a very hard to use effect overall. And yes, before you say anything, yes, the drive check skill record of the Herminia also costs counterblast too, but that is intentional because of how powerful mechanic works, so yeah. And last deck that I want to bring it up is MLV. I'll bring it in the same level as Herminia, in the sense that the engine kind of smooth now thanks to the Dial-In, which is a new card that came out that allow any encounter deck in Keter to persona right, guarantee the persona right every turn. But it also still quite an awkward deck to play for MLB, that is. So because of that, I'm thinking that okay, at least it is playable, but it needs something to really fix some of the oomph issue, I guess. I mean, like, this would be in the B. This is fairly to be in the can be in the B tier as well, but I feel like B tier deck's still a little bit better than these two at the moment. So that's pretty much for the C tier. Now we move on to the B tier. I'm not gonna touch on the glitter right line first. That's a new support came out for the them. So I'll go through after I go through the other right line first. So start off with Clarissa. I will bring her up a little bit closer to the Bugsabra because as much as I hate on-hit effect, and let's be real, on-hit effect is a very shitty mechanic, and the fact that the deck kind of focus on it, it makes the deck a little bit shitty.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
But I have to admit, she can keep her on-hit quite consistently. And the fact that it was able to more or less stand against some of the more higher tier deck decently well enough, it just shows proof that I judged a little bit too harshly. Fairy Road, there's no change for her. I do think her mechanic is solid enough. It's just that RNG kind of get in the way, and she is the most RNG of all. It's just that she can take that RNG and utilize it relatively better than the other two right here. So yeah. Then we have 4th tier. 4th tier, I would say where I put her is where I would say is the right spot. Yes, her new support allow her to reposition your friend, allowing the friend triggers to be a little bit more consistent. But also, essentially her new support doesn't really bring anything new other than ability to reuse Melty every turn. And the deck still don't have counter charger, so kind of painful for her at the moment. But the fact is that her playstyle is already kind of pretty decent from the get-go already. So I'm not changing her positioning, mainly is because nothing much changed, to put it simply, even with the release of Yuika and everything. Next up though is Hazoret. And this is one of the first few decks that I want to bring it to A- tier, which is a pretty good pick tier. So Hazoret, what I didn't realize initially is that Hazoret skill won't work if you trigger other skill to do something first. But what I didn't realize is that it actually can be activated regardless of whether the other unit will go somewhere else other than bottom of the deck after that. And because of that, the deck became very powerful in terms of draw power, but it also is biggest weak point because yes, you can have a very powerful defense, but that also means that you are sacrificing more or less your guaranteed offense unit into an RNG mulligan, which can mean both good and bad. But mostly so far I have seen with Hazoret gameplay, it is considered to be good, but I don't think it is good enough to more or less like win the top 10 spot in the A tier. So it's pretty good deck, but I think a little bit short of making things better. Okay, we move on to Bagrasawa, and this is one of those decks that I'll put start straight up into A-. The thing about 3 attack is that it's either you have a power so high and some way to restrict the opponent guard that make it hard for them to guard, or just do some kind of control or kind of like gymnastic that kind of force the opponent to guard in general. So a very good example for that is of course Prison. This is one of those cases in the sense that it's more about just hitting that high number to force the number of cards out of opponent hand. Of course, the biggest issue with the 3 attack is that if opponent has a PG, it's pretty much screwed. But Bagasawa still maintained the power position very well. And back in BT07, we did get Samadhi. And what I didn't really read through Samadhi properly was that Samadhi effect can be used even if both of the arm has been equipped. So that means you can reuse Aditya every single turn just to get a free draw and a free soul charge, keeping her soul consistency relatively at a very good level. And because of that, I have to give it to A-. Next up is Eugene, and yeah, Eugene is staying where he is at the moment. His restand mechanic is a little bit gimmicky compared to like Overlord. I made a comparison back in my previous tier list of Eugene and Overlord, in the sense that Overlord is a restand deck with a secondary retire mechanic, and Eugene is the opposite, retire with secondary restand. His secondary is a little bit too situational at the moment. But fortunately, Eugene getting a new support in BT09 because some main side character actually using it. So you might see a shift in Eugene power level by BT09. Soga. Okay, Soga, I'm gonna bring him up to be beside Bagasawa. I'll bring him to lower because Order is not a well-designed mechanic in my opinion, because of the fact that you have a brick in your hand, but you can only use this brick once per turn, and fortunately Soga can get away with that to an extent. But I feel like there could have been things more to do with this Order, but I think maybe because of the fact that it is still very early in the game, 1 year is still very young, so I think there might be more ways to play Soga in the future, especially Masanori is gonna be quite heavily featured in the season 2 of Wildrest from what I'm seeing. So yeah. Okay, next up we have Michu, and this is the first deck that I will have to put into A tier. It's sorry, not A tier, high A tier. She just kind of like short of go into the top 10, mainly because in my opinion there is a few holes that you can really counter her, and back in the BT07 I definitely underestimate her a lot. I know that she's strong, I didn't expect her to be very consistently that strong, and I have seen a lot of very good Michu player since then, so my opinion on Michu changed a lot, and that definitely make her go up to the -A tier. She'll be in the high -A tier until she get a support that, I think until she get a second Nokuno, just like the rest of the Twitter, I guess. But yeah, next up we have Overlord, and this is okay, I'm taking this into account of the new promo pack that we'll be getting, and with all that considered, yes, finally A tier, finally into the top 10. I tend to undermine the value of Overlords a bit in my tier list, but I do feel that one of the biggest issue with the Overlord is that I feel like when Overlord became too risky is when the end has the Overlord in soul, and because of that you need to wait for one more turn to get everything done, and because of that, that's opened enough ample opportunity for any deck higher than him to just aim him and just hit him really hard. And now that there is a card that kind of just like speed up that skill by one turn, it's more than enough just to push him into the deck. The deck is already strong as it is, very consistent as it is. It's just that that one promo really pushed it into the A tier for me. I feel that like if that promo doesn't exist, it's still A-. It is a very solid deck. It's just that compared to the other deck in the higher tier, it's just a little bit short of consistency. It's the same issue with the Chronojet. It can take a few turns for you to really get to the full power that the deck really has, and sometimes certain deck doesn't want to wait for you to do that. Then we have Jiwa. Jiwa and Lionon, I'm gonna put in the B tier first. They are very solid deck at the moment, but it just lacking a proper oomph. Like Jiwa lack a searcher, crossover dredge card searcher. Lionon just lacking some way to really make the rear guard attack a little bit more scary other than just like high power level. What she needs is maybe either a guard restrict or a card that get additional crit. I think that is enough to make a Lionon a little bit more threatening. Okay, next up we have Prison, and yeah, he's gonna be in A tier. I'll adjust the Overlord and the Prison positioning later, but I feel like initially back in BT06, I feel Prison power level does drop quite a bit, but after playing against a lot of Prison deck players in the remote server, I don't know why it became a popular deck to play there. She's old, but she still can kicking. To put it simply, she's one of those decks that she can easily beat down against the A- and B tier deck because of the fact that some of many A- and B tier deck takes at least 4 turns to really get to the full power. So that's exactly where she wanted it to be, because you know she get to her insane powerful form on turn 4. Grade 4 turn I mean. But yeah, overall I definitely underestimate Peterson, and yeah, you guys were right. Next up we have Bruce, and I'll put Bruce behind Michu. I'll put it this way, Michu is like essentially a more consistent version of Bruce, and when I say Bruce I mean both versions. How to put it, the problem with Bruce is essentially is a perpetually turn 4 deck, because you only activate the final rush on turn 4. And unfortunately, I think this is gonna be a position where Bruce will be at for the rest of the time, until there will be a Bruce support that like does fit in both the final rush deck and final burst, which is gonna be a new mechanic for the wirements, which is coming up in BT09. Alestial, okay, Alestial definitely gonna be not gonna be moving up from B tier, because now that I have played this, I have played it myself in tournament personally. It's more it's still very inconsistent thanks to the RNG factor of its wing mechanic, and Fanael is not enough to fix that issue. Though that element of unexpected certainty is still there. So because of that, I have to live in B tier, because that element of uncertainty applies to both of the players. So yeah. And okay, so the other 2 decks that will be shift to the A- tier is Rolo. Rolo is definitely better than Bruce. And like I said before, the deck just got hit a little bit harsh because of the elementary sanctitude became a thing. Still a very solid deck to play. It's just that just like Bruce, it's a turn 4 deck. Then PBO. PBO essentially just, if you cannot draw into your resource card, you are screwed. So because of that, it's still short of beating Michu, but its consistency is something that you shouldn't underestimate it. But if you ask me, is it able to beat the high tier deck? I don't think so. Okay, move on to A tier. I won't adjust the A tier until I put all the deck in first, just to make things fair. But there are definitely a few that I feel has to drop down from A to lower tier. The first is Drajevo.
Emotional damage.
You go there. The main reason why I'm judging Drajevo very harshly is because it's such a fragile deck, in the sense that one poke from opponent in certain holes of its setup, it is screwed. If you manage to if you can get rid of Rock Ago in some way or another, they are pretty much screwed. If you can get rid of a Falcate some way or another, the deck also lose a way to get a 4 different grade into so consistently. So essentially there's a lot of factors that can go wrong with Drajevo, and there's not a lot of way to get around it at the moment. I would say if there's a card that maybe protect those units during your opponent turn, that would be pretty much improve the consistency of Drajevo deck in general. Another deck that I think I always estimate a little bit is definitely Magnolia. I wouldn't call it, and I'm included both Elder and the Grade 3 Magnolia in this particular entry here, but I think it is definitely still a very good deck to play. The Grade 3 Magnolia has a lot of aggression and can finish you on turn 4 if you manage to play Sana right. While Elder Magnolia is a little bit more resource based, thanks to the fact that now Elder can play in late again, and because of that, both decks are more or less has very similar but very different playstyle. One is more defensive, one is more aggressive. So pick your poison, but it's still a turn 4 deck, so some of the decks still can take advantage of its weakness. Okay, so that's pretty much the deck adjustment. I know I took quite some time to talk about them, but finally we can move on to the new decks. Okay, so let's start off by the chronological order. Strike deck sets. Okay, this will surprise you because of the over-representation of the Chrono Jet in Japan format and multiple Asia tournament format. But personally for me, I would say Chronojet is more or less in the same position as Michu.
What the fuck?
I mean, like, they are more or less in the same position, mainly because that's the good thing about Chronojet is that it doesn't really have a weakness for you to aim at, other than the fact that it is a strike deck. I already made a whole video talking about how good Chronojet is in another video before this, so you should check that out for me to go into more details of the deck. But yeah, definitely A-. The reason why there is a lot of representation of Chronojet in the deck is because of how easy and cheap it is to build Chronojet. All you need is just a strike deck set, borrow some few cards that can be a little bit expensive from the other player in your team that actually play the game seriously, and boom, you get a Chronojet deck. That's how easy it is to build a deck, and that's why I feel it's one of the reasons why the deck is quite overrepresented. It's very solid and very easy to build, and that's the reason why I feel like you shouldn't overestimate the power of the Chronojet. It is still strong. It is one of the few decks that can take advantage of the overtrigger effects, the Dark Side overtrigger effects very well. So this is something that you still need to admit that it is very rare in Dark Side in general. Okay, next up we have the new glitter supports. So finally we move on to the actual glitter supports. So let's go through the order of the nations, starting from Dragon Empire, Tamayura. Tamayura is one of those decks I still don't understand how you play it, mainly because of the fact that I play mostly either Glitter Tamayura, which is pretty strong now thanks to the new Rilemi and Rarami, but the problem comes with the fact that as you have a way to gain back soul, it also kind of forces you to use more resource because of the respawn skill, Counter Blast 1, and also the counter charge skill requires your soul as well, so it doesn't completely fix the soul issue that Tamayura has. So if you guys can explain how to play Tamayura for me, please do leave in the comments. Seriously, this is one of those that I don't understand how it works, but I would say that she has a lot of flexibility thanks to the new stealth support coming in. So she had a different variant because, you know, Unprecedented is working with her as well. So if you are looking for a deck that have a lot of versatility and like can play into the different playstyle, I would say Tamayura is one of them. And with all that considered, I'm gonna put it above Magnolia. It is still a very good deck now. It's just that as they're trying to fix some issue, they introduce more. Okay, next up we move on to the Dark State, which is Chaos. And okay, this might surprise you guys and there are some bias to it, but I think Chaos is essentially A- here. It's a pretty good deck now. Like, okay, this might be me on copium here, but here's the thing. What I wanted initially for the Chaos support was a card that can be treated as a different name if there's the same copy in the soul. We get that in the form of New Mikani, but what I didn't expect is that New Mikani is such a good card.
Hey, that's pretty good.
The fact that you can just call the grade 3 Mikani from soul for almost no cost is insane. And as we all know, Mikani, the grade 3 Mikani is the crux of this deck, offense. So that means that the deck can play into a little bit of the late game now, thanks to the fact that you can just use Mikani effect to call the grade 3 and just swing for a relatively high number thanks to the Chaos very consistent plus 10k to hold regard effects. And yeah, that Mikani also fixed that issue as well. So overall, that one single card just single-handedly improved Chaos playstyle, but it is far from being the top tier deck because the deck is still a Highlander. Some of you might think, why am I putting onto the A- tier? Well, as someone who has been playtesting Chaos for a long time, I feel that like running one off doesn't really affect the way that the deck play that much. Like seriously, the deck doesn't really care that you are running Highlander that much now. So because of that, A- it is. Okay, moving on to Keter. Keter, okay, Tetria is... This might annoy some of you guys, but I think it is lower. I'll adjust the A tier as it goes, but I still think she's in the A tier. She's still one of the best deck because of how cracked the Keter support is, and the Keter support just get even more cracked in BT08. So because of that, she still maintains her positioning in the top 10. I think. Yeah, still maintain her position in the top 10. It's just that I feel like the new support doesn't really do anything much for her, while it does make something move in the other glitter deck. Because of the fact that and I think this is where her playstyle kind of work against her. She's still, I'm not talking about her respawn her swarm effect, but rather her playstyle as a light and dark effect. Because you need to be really precise with the way you play to really make use of Tegria, and that is where your experience with Kita deck will come into play if the more you play the deck. But for me, as someone who inherently has an unusual disease of being shit at every single Kita deck, and I'm not just talking about okay, I'm not playing the deck properly. It's just that when I play any effect that require filtering, like check top and get something, 80% of the time I will miss. You can check out my stream for that. And because of that, I know if the deck is a strong deck. I don't know whether it is strong enough to be in top 10 or not. So this is another case that I need your guys' help to leave in the comments below as well. Okay, next up we have Eva, and I think Eva is pretty good at where she is now. The thing is, the new cards, what make it stronger is because now she has more scheduled target to call, and also a card that can proc off scheduled effect early before the actual battle phase in the form of her new order. And yeah, that two card is decently enough to boost what is already considered to be very solid and strong deck. It's the way she's already has such a good strong filtering power and pressure. That two cards just make sure that there is different type of pressure you can exert, and surprisingly make it cheaper as well, thanks to the fact that you can, if you do not have Mobile Mind, which is very expensive right now, you can opt for the grade 1 booster countercharger that you can use, and use it together with Obscure to guarantee a countercharge. You can be a little bit more flexible with her build style right now, and because of that, I decided to put her in leave her where it is, because that's how good the support is. Then last but not least, Roroa. This, I'm gonna put it higher than Tamayura, but below Mishu and everything. Here's the thing, the issue with Roroa is that it has resource issue, and their offense is a little bit lacking in certain part of the gameplay, and the new support that he get in general fix every issue. He missing some soul, you get a grade 3 that can generate 2 tokens and give itself a soul. You need more offense power, you got a new ready Lina that can essentially just inherit the power of Momoke token. So essentially you can have 3 attack that is very powerful, and if you hit a lot of triggers, just stack everything into the Momoke, and you essentially have a deck that can swing for 40 to 60k by turn 3 easily, and that can be done very constantly. The deck still kind of need the PR order, but the offense capability that the deck get after the new support in BT08 improved vastly, that I think it deserves to be in an A- tier. Is it better than all these other decks? I'm not sure. Leave down in the comments below on that aspect. Okay, we have done every single glitter deck already, so let's move on to the new right line. Let's get the easy one out of the way. I feel like Shoutout needs something urgently. Okay, here's the thing. Shoutout needs to bind to Regard from Soul almost every turn, because you do need to do the setup at least for the first 2 turns, just so that you have enough Regard in your soul in the bind zone to consistently call every turn. And because of that means that your early part of your turn, you need to sacrifice some of your soul for that setup. And the fact that it sticks to once per turn, it's not helping, because let's make the deck relatively slow. And not only that, some of the cards require a lot of soul, like Unprecedented need a soul blast to get a free draw. Jakumetsu Art need soul blast for every attack to essentially bot your card on the opponent's side. And to put it simply, the deck use a lot of resource to get the bot they needed, but they cannot keep, they do have their decent job at keeping up with some of the resource, but not enough for me at the moment. I'm not saying the deck is unplayable. I would say the deck is in a much better position than Heroes when Heroes just got released, but I feel that it needs something to really mend the engine properly. And yes, Fogtail and Toshigarashi, do you know the dragon? it's not enough for that. Okay, then we have Lequia, and I'm happy to say this is a very solid deck. I'm gonna put it behind Hachirik because the deck has very strong draw power, has very strong offense, but the deck does have a weakness of you need to get your order to get a full attack. When you filter your soul, you need to get a decent card into your soul to get everything facilitated. But if you can get it, she is a very solid deck, and initially I thought it was very bad back when I played tested back in CFA, but after playing it in person and adjust the build to really fit her playstyle, the deck became a lot more fun, a lot more tanky, and a lot more aggressive than I think it is. And I think it's just more about like I found the right formula for it as well. Okay, next up we have, oh yes, Minerva. Minerva is, I'm gonna consider this like better than Rora. Okay, Minerva is a very powerful deck in the sense that like thanks to the very cracked hitter support, she is capable of pulling off 8 attack if she need to. She don't need to do that, but it is within her capability to pull that off. And thanks to the few cards, Drill Angel, Painkiller, and Kamomile. So essentially you can kind of guess what I'm trying to go with this. Drill Angel put Kamomile from drop soul into soul, and then just use Painkiller to soul blast out Kamomile, go into more attack. And the only thing that holds this deck back, I would say, is the fact that you need to discard Genesis card. Yes, there is a few cards that kind of help you to facilitate that, but the fact that you can't recycle that card is a little bit painful, and that means that you can't restand the Minerva consistently. I still consider it a very good deck, not good enough to essentially just beat the top 10 deck. Okay, next up we have Archite, and I'm happy to say Archite is pretty damn solid deck. A lot of people, included many of the Vanguard VTubers, consider it to be an inferior version of Eva, and I would beg to differ. The reason behind that is because Eva is all about like essentially, okay, this is something that my friend told me and I think it is perfectly fitting. Eva is all about keeping her boyfriend alive, the Obsky dude, while Archite is all about maintaining the resource of her monster. And that is where she excels. She excels at her resource and power pressure, and she can keep that power level relatively consistently well. The only drawback I would say she has is if she didn't manage to filter well with any of her filter effects or the check top 7, her research order, you are pretty much screwed with the deck. But that is really up to your chance, and most of the time the deck more or less goes off. So yeah. Last but not least, for the new right lines, the new proper right line is the Maelstrom, and is it good enough to be in the S tier? No.
Disappointed!
Is it better than their successor, Blackbird? No. Except for the fact that he can keep the multiple attack a little bit more consistent, and because of that, he is gonna be in here. Maelstrom has similar issue with Tamayura in the sense that the deck need a lot of soul to keep up with all the full power, and the deck does keep up with the soul consistency a bit thanks to inlet pulse, but I think the soul requirement of this deck is a little bit more harsher than Frapper, and the deck cannot cope up with the demand at the moment, so it needs something to actually, you know what, I'm sorry, but yeah, the more I said, I feel like Maelstrom is a little bit more mid than expected. The deck is just missing the that it needs, I would say. Like I would say, unless it get a new resource card, and yes, when some you might complain like don't you have like Trident or Inlet, I would say those are not enough. Those are far from being enough, and because of that, yeah, I'm sorry Maelstrom fan. I like the deck, I like the design, I like Maelstrom also, but he's pretty mid and missing some kind of to really hit hard like Lequia at the moment. Before we go into the actual new boss unit, I forget to do it earlier, but what about the S and A here? I forget to adjust that. So first and foremost, who is gonna be shifted into the S tier? Well, there are generally two decks that I want to talk about. The first is Blackbird and the second is Useberg. Okay, a lot of people might think I'm going to be overrating Blackbird, but I think the fact that the deck can pull off the 5 attack very consistently now, make sure that the Blackbird disgusting skill always consistently work, and that means that the deck has a consistent retire, draw, and also guard restrict. And not only that, the deck more or less draws a lot. Like I think it's very common that you will see the Blackbird on turn 3 to have 10 cards in their hand, That's how consistent their multi-attack is now. Plus the fact that they don't really need that many counterblasts as well, but they do need some resource to counter shot, to add it into soul. But the thing is that demand for the soul that it needs more or less fit the build of the demand that the Flagberg has, and because of that, Flagberg, in my opinion, is currently one of the S tier deck in my opinion. Useberg, I have already been talking about it for the longest time in terms of how well the deck filtered, and the deck gets better thanks to the Tempest as well, but I think the reason I have to shift it up is because of how much crack Keter support has been lately, and Useberg did get some benefit from that for sure. I can confidently say, yeah, Useberg is very strong right now. So if you guys were wondering who are the top 3 from number 1 to 3, I'll arrange it this way: Useberg, Kyrie, and Flagberg. The reason why I still put Kyrie in the top is because Kyrie has such a consistent gameplay, and the fact that she can consistently bounce card back to hand always means that she can just get a lot more resource to guard, and also avoid the control if they're up against a control deck. And also the deck has some new toy to play. I mean, like LO3 already kind of push her into the S tier, but it kind of, as someone who just been a little bit more invested in the Recall Monasterio, I found that there are a few more tools that you can definitely play around with Kyrie already that I wasn't aware of at the start, and because of that I personally feel she's still in the S tier, and because of that Bastion and Maha will drop into A tier. They won't drop into the A- because I still think they are very solid decks. So where I'm gonna put, well, Bastion I will put it behind, I'll put in the same level as Tegria. It's a grade 3 focus deck, it's the problem, and with the new support, since we are not counting, it does alleviate some of the issue but not completely. And for Maha Nirvana, I will put it on the same level as Lucia. By the way, Overlord is on the same level as Maha, and the Prison is here. Yeah, that's a right spot to put. So essentially, I think Maha consistency is still there, but I think that these top 3 deck, or the deck higher than this tier, are more or less can beat the deck just fine. Oh, and also Varro is definitely moved down a few batch to here. More or less same issue, inconsistency. Oh, and oh yeah, I just see the Gravidia, and would you look at that? Let me show you something, guys.
One eternity later.
Okay, now you guys happy? Yeah. Okay, in all fairness though, Gravidia, I think it is still a strong deck. The reason why I don't want to put it at S tier is because it's heavily rely on the player's luck. Even though the deck does filter a lot very well, and thanks to the Command Rusher, the deck became a lot more aggressive. But the thing about this deck is that it became such a brain dead deck, and I feel bad for the deck also. As long as you are lucky. In fact, Gravidia is one of those decks where if you give this to a new player, they will win the tournament just fine. That's how easy to pilot Gravidia is, and because of the fact that there's only 9 decks in the A tier at the moment, Chronojet got shipped up. Oh, would you look at that?
Spicy.
Okay, we move on to the last boss units, which there are 6 of them. And just to make things life easier for you guys, here's I'll shift the tier list a little bit so you guys can see all of them. Okay, first up, let's go Eridogrima, and this one is D. Okay, not D, sorry. Actually, here, yes. The thing about Eridogrima is that it's such a fun card to play because you can mix a lot of set order and make a very interesting combo. The problem I would say is that the deck lacks power to an extent, and also consistency in triggering his check top 5 skill. So if there's a card that come in and fix the issue, that would make the deck a lot better, but being the magazine promo, I highly doubt it. Next up we have Baphomedes, exactly the same thing, magazine boss, and I would say Baphomedes is pretty good. I would say he's a little surprisingly, he's actually a bit more consistent than Dragable because he only has focus on one grade 3, and because of that it opened up a can of worm that we didn't expect, and also it has a compatibility with Bubesu. Shout out to my friend John who pointed out to me that Bubesu does actually work with Baphomet. Overall, it becomes a possible multi-attack deck that does have reliance on the key piece, but he himself can do some job already. Okay, then we move on to my favorite, Translaughter. Oh wait, Author Slaughter. This one I would say is in the same tier as this, in the sense that the deck is one of those decks that you need Brainwash to facilitate everything. And it's a funny 3-attack deck that doesn't really work as consistently as deck like Prison, Bakasava or Soga. The only way for you to fix this deck issue, I would say, is have something that can be treated at grade 0 so that his effect can be a little bit more consistent. And if he can get a rare card that can get more power related to his skill, I think that should fix his issue. But yeah, he's definitely a fun deck to play, and definitely better than this deck below right now. It's just a meme deck lah. It's just a meme deck that kind of works. Okay, next up we have Fafria, and this is I will put Fafria in same tier as here, I guess. As a boss unit that can really run off in a deck, is a very powerful card because he can get his own power, he can withstand, and his condition is not that hard to pull off, and he has ability to facilitate that to happen. The problem with this deck though is the fact that you cannot run more than one copy of him. Because of that, your offensive option is kind of limited. There's a cards that can facilitate his skill very well, but there's not a strong unit that really support his playstyle at the moment. And the fact that he needs Counterblast 2 for it is very painful. It's the same issue with Meteor, but it's still better than Meteor because he don't need to do anything much. The moment you hit his condition, you can just stop soul charging, and that's where the problem lies. If you need to balance your soul charge card and your offense card properly, but it is really hard to balance in his case compared to decks like McMegane or Luquia, because those deck requirements are a little bit easier to achieve. One is just shove shit into soul. Another is you need a specific card, but you only need very few of them. So yeah, Fafria is definitely a decent deck to play, but I think it needs something that really pushes the deck, like Graham Grace. Graham Grace is a very solid deck, and I'm willing to rank it above Bruce, and I'm willing to rank it above Bruce. The thing about Graham Grace is that it has constant 4 attack, it gives additional power boost to back rolls during Persona Ride, and it has a specific support that works very well. Essentially makes Graham Grace easy to draw deck, has a high compatibility with the Keter engine, and the deck can drive check 3 times because of the new grade 3. So in general, very solid, very scary deck if you are underestimating it. It's kind of like, what if you make a really cool over trigger effect into a card, and Graham Grace is the result of that, and he is definitely a very good deck. Last but not least, Prat Petraga. D tier. The thing about here's the thing about Petraga playstyle that you need to understand. One is that the deck has a capability to do multiple attack either as a Vanguard, from the Vanguard, or from the rear guard, so it is not bad. But being a Highlander lyrical, it kind of missed a card that kind of glue everything together at the moment. Like, the deck is strong, but I feel like it's missing some, it needs another piece to really tie everything together properly, and that's exactly how I feel about Petraga at the moment. And yeah, that's the tier list. I think I make a fair judgment to a lot of decks now. There might be some that I missed, so do leave the comments below on which deck you think should be put higher or should be put lower. And also, do you guys think that I put Gravidia in her own separate tier is justified or not? Do leave down in the comments below. And that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, and this is McMegane signing out.